Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome inside the latest edition of Across the Cast. We near 200 episodes, two away. We got Jeffrey Santa, co-host of the Cleveland Pulse. Jeff, excited to get with you here today. We're going to talk some Cavs. We're going to look ahead to the future, and we're going to look at Mook Morris's very, very impressive debut this evening.
Absolutely. Quality win from our Cavaliers tonight. Let's get into it.
Let's do it. Across the Cavs, Network 216, after this. I will waste no time here, Jeff. The Cavs finally announced after Pat Bev's pod broke the news Friday. They announced late Saturday night that they had indeed signed Marcus Morris Sr. to a 10-day contract. So what was your initial reaction? And now what's your new or same response after watching him play a game in the Wine and Gold?
Well, I think it's interesting when, it's 2024 and Pat Bev is breaking news. But, hey, he turned out to be a credible source. It took a little bit longer for the team to come out with official details. What I thought was really somewhat of bad news on the face of it, just because to me it kind of screams that Mobley's injury, as freak as it was a little bit worse than they initially thought. Not that it's going to be anything that's going to linger into the playoffs, but maybe something that was going to take a little bit longer than they initially thought. So they were like, hey, we have to go bring him back up. We have to go get a guy who's battle tested, who's been around the league for a long, long time. They said it on the broadcast repeatedly tonight, 13 seasons. You saw some of his experience show tonight. I mean, cool, calm, and collected, 20 minutes, 14 points, a handful of three-pointers. The shot looked good. It didn't really look like he's, been a month off of basketball. I believe they said his last action was like the first week of February. Yep. So, hey, man, it's a 10-day contract. You help us win the first game of your 10-day contract. Everything's cool with me.
Yeah, and I think for me, and he's one of these players, right, Jeff? And we got the good end tonight, but I feel like, as fans of a specific team, we watch with such low expectations, genuinely, of other teams' role players that every time they make a shot, they think, oh, they're a baller, they're a shooter, they're a walking bucket. While the fan base is meanwhile exploding about all the things they don't do that we missed in the other 81 games that maybe we don't see. But I feel like with Morris, at least my expectations is, with the exception to his weird beef with Luka a couple of years ago in the bubble, that he's a guy you would want to have around at minimum of these 10 days because he can shoot. He is battle tested. He's been on a number of winning teams, the Clippers being the most recent one. And he's a guy that you don't really have to run plays for, as we saw when he used to play for the Celtics. He can get you 15 to 20 points if you really need it that night, or, he'll just be another voice in your ear that'll help you do what you need to do.
I mean, I think he brings that element of toughness that this team has really missed for the better half of the last 2 years. I think that we get it confused with, hey, we have all these injuries and we were able to win games like tonight against the Indiana team that is going to be in the postseason. That is a team we could see in the first round for a 7-game set. But to me, that's really more resilience than toughness. You could win with guys down and it could still be in a manner where maybe you aren't pushing the other team around. Maybe you do get bullied. Like in the first half, the first quarter, terrible rebounding effort once again, something that seemed to be addressed, something that they kind of took pride in as the game progressed, but not a new theme here for the Cleveland Cavaliers as far as, hey, we're a young team. We've tried to bring in guys who are more experienced, more established, have been able to affect how other teams play and how to get other teams, in fits where they're not playing their form of basketball. And I think Marcus Morris is that guy. Is he going to be elite every night? Is he going to, come out here and give you 4 threes every night? No, he'll probably have games in this 10-day contract. He'll have more fouls than points. And that's not going to look great. We'll probably be frustrated when that happens. But at the end of the day, if that's the physicality he brings, that's not going to be a total, net negative if he could still be a player on the court where, hey, we got to look out for this guy on defense. We got to make sure we box him out. It's not going to be a walk in the park when he's out there. So I was a little disappointed in Kobe that it took this long. It's really, really, really tough to discredit his, moves because of how good we were playing pre-All-Star break and pre-trade deadline. But at the end of the day, you could be the best team in basketball for a stretch. You're not going to be the best team in basketball all year. It's really, really unlikely. It's probably going to be one or two teams a year, most likely one. It's okay to go and explore some of these moves. Like we've talked about, is this guy going to be, a stud for the whole 10-day? Probably not. He's probably going to have ups and downs. That's just who he is. But you bring a guy in, he could be a culture changer. He could be someone who brings you that extra oomph that you didn't have before.
So I want to backtrack actually to what you just finished with there, Jeff. So are you looking more at the fact that the 10-day contract signees, Sharife Cooper, Pete Nance, Zaire Smith, et cetera, were all charge guys that weren't going to play as much, or more on the fact that they didn't trade anybody at the deadline to try and potentially get a new name in?
Like I said, I think that you can't. It's really tough in hindsight. It was tough in the moment, and it's tough in hindsight because you were playing so good at the All-Star break and the trade deadline, but you can't really expect to stay healthy throughout the whole year. I think we've actually had, outside of this season, we've had decent injury luck, since the play-in tournament and beyond. It hasn't been pristine. You've had your Darius Garland moments, stuff like that. You've had some nagging injuries, but you haven't had like a string of crazy injuries like you've had this year. With that being said, I think that the charge guys, 10-day contracts are cool and interesting for them, the Pete Nances and the Sharife Coopers, but those aren't going to be guys who could come into a situation and kind of calm the storm. Like if it's a 7-0, 8-0 run in the playoffs against our Cavalier reserves and Marcus Morris is out there, he's going to have the most experience on the court outside of a Tristan Thompson as far as, hey, I've been in these situations before. I've been on rosters that have experienced this before, and I kind of know what to do when the going gets tough. So could you have made a move at the deadline? I don't really know if there was anything out there that made sense, but it's more of me making commentary on, like, don't have a closed mindset because, you never will know what could come of a signing as far as, hey, it could look really good in the moment and there could be underlying factors that make it turn out bad, or the other way around. Like, is Marcus Morris a home run, signing? He's a guy who's for the buyout market, basically. He got waived to sign with a contender. So it's interesting how the NBA works.
Yeah, so this year they signed 13-year vet Marcus Morris. Last year they signed 14-year vet Danny Green,
right,
who really didn't emerge until games number 80, 81, and 82. Those emergences of the last three games got him first-round minutes, and it is telling, Jeff, of where the Cavs are at now versus then. Because last year, when Danny Green made that one three-pointer in the first half against the Knicks, I think it was game 2 of the first-round series, we were going crazy. And we think about now, just the addition, obviously injuries are the worst, but of what Strus has brought, of what Niang has brought, and just the number of guys you can count on to confidently shoot the ball. And look, there are nights, like look at tonight's 3-point numbers from the Cavs. And I'm going to double check. I believe there were 12 for 32.
Yep.
Correct. So 37.5%. But I would say most of these 32 attempts were not rushed shots. They were not hesitation shots. And I feel like throughout the season, the nights they've been good, even the nights they haven't been, they finally have guys. And this is where it's going to matter most, depending on who's on the court. And we're going to get to that soon. But those types of guys that'll shoot the ball when it's passed their way and not just make the extra kick, those are the guys you want on your team when the defense starts getting more aggressive and the whistle gets a little tighter.
I'm glad that you brought that up, because for better or for worse, and I'm going to make the argument tonight that it is actually for the better, and it hasn't really been talked about, but this Cavs team is a 3-point shooting team. I know that's what you aspire to be in the modern day NBA. Like, don't take the twos. Analytics say they're bad. Take high percentage layups and floaters and take threes. I'm well aware that's the philosophy, but this team performs at its best level, regardless of the talent, regardless of the personnel, regardless of the availability, when they consistently take threes. That's the big part I think a lot of people gloss over. when it's, the day after, or what went wrong in this game, what went right in this game. You have to take a lot of threes to make a lot of threes. So Indiana took 6 more than us tonight. We just happen to be a lot more efficient. They're 9 for 38. We're 12 for 32. So taking threes is my first point, and, just having the ability to stretch the floor comes along with that. I love Jarrett Allen. How many times is he making 4 3-pointers in a game? I love Evan Mobley. How many times is he making 4 3-pointers in a game? Maybe he's done that. He had 3, I think, earlier this year. Maybe he had 1 game with 4, right after the injury where he was hot and the stroke.
It was 2 in that game. I'll say it was I believe it was 2 in that game, and then a couple games in a row with 1.
Yep, but the stroke was looking good. But that's even going back to my original point. At full strength, hottest team in the league, you still could look at this team and be like, yeah, you could see a little bit of flaws here. You could see Damian Jones, not really that guy. They're not in love with Isaiah Mobley for whatever reason. I'm sure they know more behind the scenes than we do as fans, and I'll take their words on that. So, you kind of knew, even when we were playing lights out basketball, you might have had a discrepancy at the 4 position, the backup 4, the backup 5 position. So Marcus Morris comes in tonight, 4 threes, space the floor, not hesitant to shoot the basketball. And that's the biggest thing for me. If you could space the floor, if you could give our guards the ability to drive toward the rim, the Caris LeVerts of the world, another good performance tonight when he's basically the main scorer and the main ball handler outside of Darius Garland. I think this is his perfect role when you have injuries, unfortunately. He kind of gets lost in the weeds when Strus is out there and Donovan's out there, and he takes a backseat role, which is really the role we need him for in the playoffs. But you see how he's optimized tonight, and just spacing the floor is huge for me, taking threes and making threes down the stretch.
And to me, Marcus Morris is that guy on the playground. You need a shooter for your team. You have 1 pick left. You look in the pool of players. You see Marcus Morris. You're like, shooter! And that's exactly who you want to bring in. And now as we transition to tonight's game, I do want to start with Caris LeVert, because I think he is the starting point for any conversation. This was his 7th game in a row with 7 assists. And it's unfortunate that the 6th man of the year race has really seen that for most of the year was a 2-man race between he and Monk. But Bobby Portis has gone insane over the last month. Naz Reid shouldn't end up with enough starts to be disqualified. He's been playing insane with with Cat. And Rudy's been out too for the last couple of games. But Caris, 23, 8, and 11 in a spot start tonight, Jeff. His playmaking's fantastic, with 6 of those assists coming in the first 12 minutes in the first quarter. And there really isn't much he's not doing. Gives you the big baskets, he rebounds, and he plays his heart out in the defensive end.
So tonight, and don't get me wrong here, great performance tonight, quality win, big for the standings, all things considered, which I'm sure we'll get into. But tonight is, I think, for a lot of fans, and what we've seen recently with the injuries, the very frustrating, fact about Caris LeVert is that even though he's been in the league for a while, if you put this guy on a less talented roster, he could be your number 1 or number 2 option, and he could take a roster to the play-in minimum, maybe a 6 seed. I think he's that talented of a basketball player. I've really never had, as far as the acquisition from him, I've never had a question mark of, can this guy play basketball at a high level? I think that is irrefutable. My issue is when he is with the roster at full strength, you're not going to get this from him. And unfortunately, with the business side of things, you can't. You have multiple players who have priority over him. And yes, he's a guy that you do keep on the roster. If your point is to keep him on the roster because if there's injuries, he could do this, I'm on board with you. I totally agree. I don't think that's the best lens to look through if you're talking about, hey, we need to win championships, because when Strus is out there, when Mitchell is out there, when Darius Garland is playing at a high level of basketball, that automatically makes you the 4th option at the very least. You'd like to have Mobley just as involved in the offensive side of the basketball as LeVert. And then obviously Jarrett Allen's having a really good offensive year as well. So he could take over when he absolutely needs to. He gives us big wins like he does tonight, and I have to respect him for that. But you're not going to get 23, 11, and 8 from LeVert in a playoff series. And if you do, it means people are injured or it means people are performing, at a low level, and that's just not going to get the job done.
So you mentioned the playoffs, so we'll take a quick little walk over there. So Jeff, we are, as of today, this is March 18th. April 20th marks the first day of the official playoff. The hope for the Cavs is they don't have to play any games during play-in week, the days leading up, that they can just escape, because they're 5.5 out of it right now. And yes, that sounds like a little, but you just play it safe with all your injuries. You've been up and down, avoid it at all costs.
True.
Try and stay in the top 3, avoid the Celtics in the first round, and you hope for the second round as well. So what I want to talk about with the playoffs here is you mentioned the injuries, and Strus has now missed 8 or 9 games in a row, and he doesn't have a timetable. Evan hurt himself landing on a dunk 13 days ago. Doesn't have a firm timetable, but hopefully less within the next couple weeks. Donovan was back. Tristan messed up his nose, but that's not the biggest issue for him. It's his knee. The injections aren't doing what he had hoped they would. And Dean Wade, who should be back, I think might have been paternity leave. It was never publicly disclosed when he missed 3, has missed a few more with his knee. So with all this said, right, and you're trying to figure out who's even going to be in a healthy rotation, because still, even with a fully healthy rotation, you're probably Xing Merrill and Thompson, but now with Morris, you add yet another name into the hat. Yep. What are your expectations, health or not? I guess maybe you have to look at 2 different sides. What are your playoff expectations for the Cavs? And with this season, what would you consider to be a disappointment?
So taking the roster, my expectations, believe it or not, right now, like you said, March 18th, is that everyone is healthy for a first-round playoff series. I think they're taking it extremely cautiously. I think Donovan Mitchell could play basketball if he really, really needed to. I think Max Strus could play basketball if he really, really needed to. Dean Wade, I think, is the only guy who's actually technically not injured, as you mentioned. Mobley, I think if Mobley had to play a game today, I think it would be a long shot he would play. But I think you give him a couple more weeks and he'll be all right. With that being said, and I think we have a competent roster to win, basketball games down the stretch here. Now you have all these guys who weren't supposed to play all these minutes playing all these minutes. Niang's playing between 30 and 35 minutes. Merrill plays 25 tonight. Morris plays 20 tonight. LeVert plays 38 tonight. It's going to be tricky. It's going to be tough waters to navigate. I wouldn't want to be JB Bickerstaff. Furthermore, with that all being said, I think you have to get the 2 seed. I really try to not get into the ode organizations, look at the standings and they think they have a better matchup here, or is it go out there and win every game every night? I try to get away from that, but every year we get into March, I'm like, yeah, I think teams are trying to position themselves appropriately. I think if Miami remains in the 6th seed, I think they would be pleasantly thrilled with a matchup with us in the 3rd seed, especially after the performance that we put out in the postseason last year. Yep. So I would love to get the 2 seed because I think that gives you the highest percentage chance of getting a team that you could beat. I think Indiana, I think we're a better team than them. Could I say definitively we take care of business in a first-round series against them? I'm not quite there yet. And I know that might be a little shocking to the viewers and the people listening. I'd be very nervous in a first-round series against Miami. And if Embiid is healthy, I would be very nervous in a first-round series against Philadelphia, even though I think that's actually a better matchup than us somehow than Indiana. Yeah, it's close. I think the 2 seed is huge for us. Give me one of the play-in teams. I don't think there's a chance we get Orlando. There's always a chance, but we're probably not going to play New York. It's unlikely we play Orlando, and everyone else is in the mix. But first-round exit, that's going to be catastrophic. Any way you slice it, could be any of those teams is going to be catastrophic. Even if it's 7 games, we're still not getting let off the hook. You have to win a playoff series. You have to play a competent second-round playoff series for my expectations to be met. I'm talking 6 games. I'm talking 7 games. And I think that's the minimum there.
And then, Jeff, a lot has been said about the job he's done, for better and for worse, depending on the day. But how would you grade the type of season that you've seen from JB Bickerstaff, and how you feel about him today, March 18th, as a coach of the Cleveland Cavaliers?
I'm I think the JB narrative is just kind of looked at all wrong because I gave JB, let's just take the last couple of seasons. I'll give him an A for the play-in year for the regular season. I'm gonna give him a non-grade for the 2 playing games because tough.
Yep.
Playing tournament, kind of your first, not your first rodeo though. You had a playoff series in Houston with Harden. I know that was the early stages of your career, but still the truth. And I'll give him a not enough evidence there. Just 2 games. Anything can happen in 2 games, and kind of a bad draw. Trey Hawks, Atlanta, and of course we got to play Kyrie and Katie in the first round, and we know how they play against us. Second year, last year, I'll give him an A in the regular season again. He failed in the playoffs. D- at the absolute best, outcoached by Tom Thibodeau, not an elite coach in the ranks of the Eastern Conference. I have a lot of respect for Thibs as a basketball mind. He's nowhere close to Spoelstra, in my opinion. I don't even know if he's, I think he's on the same level as kind of Doc Rivers, and Nick Nurse, I think, is still a step above him. This year, I'll give him an A for the regular season. My point here, Zach, is it really don't matter. The dude has had basically passing with flying colors for 3 regular seasons in a row. If you underperform in the playoffs, he's going to be unemployed. If you get first round bounced again, he should not and will not be the coach. However, if you think it's fair, if you think it's unfair, if you think he, got a bad draw with injuries, he's not going to be the coach after this year if you lose in the first round.
Yeah, and I feel like that has to be the case. I really, I'm definitely one of those Cavs fans that's you wouldn't call me the worst, but you'd think, oh, bad game, bad effort. Because here's what I said a couple weeks ago, and I'm curious what you think about this.
Okay.
About JB, and this is assuming the Cavs don't reach their peak under him. As I kind of compared his situation in Cleveland, maybe with a couple less years, to the Brett Browns of the world, where you inherit a team that hasn't been winning much. You know it might take a while. You get them the first taste of the playoffs, but you can never get over that hump that's in your way. Is there any validity to that, or do you think that for JB it should be looked at differently?
I'm going to give a shout out here to my co-host over at the Cleveland Pulse, Logan LeDuc, sends me a text. This is a couple weeks ago. Right now, as far as the last 2 seasons, this Cavaliers roster and makeup and build is the Atlanta Hawks teams of old when we had LeBron, with multiple stints. There would be these teams in the East, specifically the second time we had them. Oh, Atlanta's so good. They're going to contend for the 1 seed. They're the 2 seed. They're the 3 seed. Regular season studs, when push comes to shove and the superstars come out in the postseason, they got walked all over. Maybe they even put up good fights and good efforts in a series. But, when it was LeBron on the Cavs and, I was not scared road or home series playing the Atlanta Hawks when it came to the postseason when April and May rolled around. Yeah. Like, that's just me. Even the 7-game series that we play against Boston, I'm like, we have LeBron in the game 7. Finals were the expectations. Finals were where we went to. And the craziest part, Zach, is you have guys on this roster that could, they could boss up and make superstar appearances in the postseason. Donovan Mitchell could go on an absolute tear. He could win 2 series alone from us, 35 a night, 10 assists, however you want to cut this, the slash line. But when the whistles tighten, when the games get more important and every possession really matters, your Giannis's come out in the world. Your Jimmy Butlers come out in the world. Your Eric Spoelstras come out in the world. This is where your Kevin Durant's and all those guys have made their name and etched their name in history. So it's a totally different ball game.
Yeah, no, it definitely is a different ball game, and it's something where my personal hope is that get into the first round. You should have home court again. You try and get to 2-0, or at the absolute least take game 1, because while the West is certainly the better beast right now, and the win-loss I don't think is enough of an indication of that, because outside the top 5 in the West, we think it's wide open. Lakers and Warriors are going to battle the 9-10 as of right now if the Rockets don't stay hot, which is insanity.
Yep.
And the other game is going to be any 2 of Suns, Mavs, Kings, which is also just so unfair, right? That potentially 3 out of 5 of these teams are going to fall out of the main playoff. Several of them are going to miss it, which is nuts. Imagine LeBron losing in the play-in, right? Because he knocked Curry out of the play-in a couple of years ago. That's how crazy. And they might be doing this again now. But I think with that said, while the East is not as deep, there's still no easy matchup, right? Because you look at it, and I'm gonna pull up the standings here. I feel like Chicago's position could potentially do what they did last year, as long as they can handle Atlanta, who is more than likely going to hold on to 10. There's no competition there. They take down Atlanta and play the loser of that 7-8 game. I feel like if they can get DeMar DeRozan in the crowd again, and then they can sneak into the first round, and they're probably a first-round exit, and they can't be the 7. But I feel like they can have a fun series with Boston, where I think they can kind of do what the Hawks did out of the play-in last year and maybe take them to 5 or 6. Maybe they can expose any flaws for the other teams in the East as you go forward. And then I see the teams I just mentioned, Indiana, it did drop to 8 with the loss against Cleveland. They were 6 before. Miami, Philly, Indy, 2 of them, or 2 or 3 of them will still get in, and you don't really want to play anyone, right? I think the way we think about this, as long as it's not the Knicks, the Celtics, or the Bucks in the first round, you're confident, even though you have to worry about every single team. Especially, right, Jeff? I think what we learned from last year with the Knicks, we were confident coming in. And the biggest confident. Right. The most overlooked problem was that we forgot the Hawks dismantled them 2 years before, and it took them 2 years to get back to the playoffs, where they're just like, yeah, we can't do that again. Tibbs was coaching for his job more than anybody else. And even with Julius Randle out of the lineup, he found a way, which was not the norm for the Knicks like it's been this year with Julius out of the lineup, to make winning moves, personnel, and just firing everyone up. But with that said, the reason I go on this whole thing is that the Cavs are not a sure thing no matter where they finish. And I think we need to come in with the expectation that no matter who they play, they're going to have to get up every game. And this is going to be the first time I think they're coming in realizing that they have to play a new brand of basketball. So my hope is when we get to that postseason, whoever the matchup is, wherever the Cavs finish, that they realize that they need to wake up every day. They need to change sets every single game. And you're using the entire playbook maybe over the course of the first 3 games of a series, and then you're just seeing what works and trying to outsmart the other team instead of outplay them, perhaps.
And you really have to just look at a playoff series like it really just is so crazy how much different it is than the regular season, because you have a staff put together who goes through it and looks at the scouting, looks at the film. But if you have one day in between games, if you have back to back, you're not getting to this granular level of, hey, we have to do this. When they run this set, this is what we're going to do defensively. This guy likes to go to his left. Okay, he's never going off the glass when he gets this low in the paint. He's never going off the glass. He's only going for a floater here. Every circumstance changes based on who you're playing. And what I really have, noticed from observing playoff series for a decent amount of time, I'd like to think the last, 15 years, it's really not who has the first punch. It's who can counterpunch the most effectively. I think unfortunately last year the Knicks had the strongest first punch and they had the strongest counterpunch. So that's how you end up in 5 games. That's how you get a 4-game, 5-game, set going on there. But I kind of look down this list, Zach, and for me, it's head coaching matchups at the top of the ticket. Like I don't want to play against Thibodeau again. Sorry. I think the Knicks are in the best position. Like I would actually almost prefer to be in the 4. I don't want to be in the 3. I want to be in the 2 or the 4 if the 4 is playing, or if Orlando's the 5. And I want to be in the 2 kind of regardless. Actually, I don't really want to be in the 4, but I would rather play Orlando first round than any of these teams, just based off the head coaching matchup. I think Thibodeau has a coaching advantage. I think Nurse has a coaching advantage. I think Rick Carlisle is a very competent, head coach, been around for a long time. I think Spoelstra has a coaching advantage. In Chicago and Atlanta, I mean, I wouldn't be too worried about them in a series. Like you said, not that we could overlook anyone, but yeah, I mean, coaching I think is huge when you have to, when you have to game plan for a team potentially 7 games in a row, you don't see it in the regular season. It's just so different.
Yeah, it certainly changes things. And we'll see. Jamal Mobley, to his credit, earning that extension, taking the Magic from the cellar, something that none of the coaches before him could do. I want to say he's the one that replaced Frank Vogel directly, but I think Steve Clifford was there, got them a first-round appearance twice, couldn't do much else. Then it took a little while. They also even going before they had Scott Skiles for one season, then he just randomly left before the draft. It was a very weird little 1 year run because he had them as a 36-46 team, but I also think he had Serge Ibaka and Jeff Green on his roster. People forget that Serge Ibaka played for the Orlando Magic, and the NBA store always randomly floats their Serge Ibaka shirt from the Magic just back into the mix because no one remembers that he did that.
Classic.
Very classic. All right, Jeff. We talked about the Cavs and what happened tonight. We talked about the Morris debut. The Cavs have 3 games left this week, 2 with Miami, 1 with Minnesota. I'm going to ask you, assuming that only Dean comes back and no one else returns from the injury list in this time, record prediction and worst case scenario.
So it's gonna be a fun week, potential playoff first round matchup here in the back-to-back format. Interesting how we were talking about how it rarely gets emulated in the regular season, but here we are. I mean, I don't want to make it seem like that all we want to focus on here is the playoffs. The Cavs have had an impressive regular season. They've shown grit and they've had to grind some of these victories out. Hasn't been easy, and my favorite thing so far is they figured out how to just win basketball games. I get frustrated. It's not always pretty, and you lose games by some decent margins as of late due to the injuries and due to some other teams playing, really good basketball. But even a game like tonight, they could have. There was an alternate universe even 2 years ago where this Cavaliers team maybe drops that game or does something stupid down the stretch, and then it's a difference maker. But I think we're playing inspired hoops right now. Give me us in the first game against Miami. I think they'll take care of business on the second half of that 2-game little stretch, and then I know Minnesota's going through some of the same struggles we are as far as the injury bug. I feel like it's going to be difficult to beat them 2 times in a row because we did just beat them. So I got to give that game to them. I think we'll go 1-2 for the rest of the week, but winning tonight does help a lot.
Absolutely does. My personal hope will be 2-1. So the game's going to be Wednesday, Friday, Sunday. It goes Miami, Minnesota, Miami, with one of the Miami games being in Cleveland.
Yep.
And the other one being over there in a warmer climate. But, a whole lot still to happen for the Cavs this season. Should be a joy and also a very anxious next 4 weeks. Cavs have a whole lot of games left. Whole lot could change in the seeding. Just win a few more. Try and pass the Bucks. You now own the tiebreaker over with tonight's win, right? And then we can just hope for the best, right? All we can do is let them know each night that the Cavs play, right? Let them know.
Absolutely.
All right, Jeff. So he's Jeff Santa. He is the co-host of the Cleveland Pulse. Where can we find you and Logan, and then where can we find all of the tremendous work that you guys do?
Absolutely. Well, first, Zach, appreciate you having me on tonight. Love talking Cavs basketball with other creators in the community. Keep up the grind. Huge respect out to you. Putting out that content, by the hours sometimes. I'm like, another tweet. All right. I mean, he's on one today. But yeah, we're the Cleveland Pulse on YouTube. You just type in the Cleveland Pulse, we'll show up. And then we're at Pulse Cleveland over on X. I think 7 or 8 followers away from 5K. So come on,
baby.
Yep.
I'll hopefully see you there in about a month, but let's see what the people want. Obviously, big credit to you. You guys have had a nice growth this year. You were in the low 4,000s when the year started, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep, got over 1,000 on YouTube, and coming up on 5K. So it's been a good start for 2024.
Let's get it, baby. Cross the Cavs, Cleveland Pulse. We are back real soon. Network 216. Cavs are back in action on Wednesday. Let's talk.